Before we begin Lesson 1 in the punctuation unit, let me remind you that you should have taken the pre-study diagnostic exam for punctuation and mechanics. If you haven't yet, please stop the video and complete that quiz before proceeding. Great! Now that you've completed the pre-study diagnostic on punctuation, let's dive right into Lesson 1 commas. You'll find this information in your textbook on pages HB 78 through HB 84. Punctuation matters. It's critical to clear communication. Missing or misused punctuation can lead to serious, if sometimes hilarious, misunderstandings. For example, this sign that says hot children under the age of 10 need adult supervision. How about this place? I think what this sign is supposed to convey is that if you're sitting at a table, you need to have ordered something off the menu. However, what it actually says is that customers are on the menu. And where did those customers on the menu come from, you may be wondering? Apparently, they were pedestrian prey of cautious hunters near this trail. Here's another one where the comma is literally the difference between what's for dinner and who's for dinner. Commas don't just prevent cannibalism, they can also clear up a lot of confusion. Take, for example, the title of this best-selling book, Eats, Shoots, and Leaves. The cover shows two pandas, one with a gun in its paw and one whitewashing the comma. Is the book about a panda that dines, then fires a gun and exits, or about the panda's customary diet? In fact, it's a book about punctuation. The ambiguity of its title illustrates how commas affect meaning. There are specific circumstances that require commas. These are the biggies: to join independent clauses with a coordinating conjunction, to set off introductory words, to separate items in a series, to set off non-essential elements, parenthetical information, transitional expressions, quotations, addresses, interjections, and tag questions. Put a comma before the coordinating or fanboys conjunctions and, but, for, nor, or, so, and yet when they connect two independent clauses. An independent clause, remember, is a complete sentence with a subject and a verb that is a complete thought. The comma goes before the conjunction and signals that one idea is ending and another's beginning. I do not love Shakespeare, comma, but I still have those books. Most people think the avocado is a vegetable, comma, yet it is actually a fruit. The blue ribbon went to Susanna, comma, and Sarah got the red ribbon. Without the comma, readers might first think both girls got blue ribbons. Although some writers omit the comma, especially with short independent clauses, you'll never be wrong to include it. I was smart, comma, and I knew it. No comma is needed between the verbs when a single subject performs two actions. Many fast food restaurants now give calorie counts on menus and offer a variety of healthy meal options. Augustine wrote extensively about his mother, but mentioned his father only briefly. The verbs are wrote and mentioned, so no comma is needed before the but. Use a comma after an introductory word, phrase, or clause to mark the end of the introduction and the start of the main part of the sentence. Typically, comma, a girl has a best friend with whom she sits and talks, frequently telling secrets. The introductory word here is typically. In terms of wealth, rather than income, comma, the top 1% control 40%. This is an introductory phrase. And this sentence has an introductory clause. Even ignoring the extreme poles of the economic spectrum, comma, we find enormous class differences in the lifestyles among the haves, the have-nots, and the have-littles. This sentence's introductory clause is a dependent clause. When Miss Emily Grierson died, comma, our whole town went to her funeral. Again, some writers don't use a comma after a short introductory word phrase or clause, but it's never wrong to include one, especially in formal academic writing. Remember this smoking food sign from earlier? The speaker failed to use commas to separate items in a series: smoking, food, and beverages. The rule is to use a comma to separate the items in a series. The items may be words, phrases, or clauses. I spend a great deal of time thinking about the power of language, the way it can evoke an emotion, comma, a visual image, comma, a complex idea, comma, or a simple truth. The final comma in a series is called the Oxford comma, and some writers leave it out. However, this omission can confuse readers. With the Oxford comma, it's clear that Washington and Lincoln were both invited, along with some rhinos. However, without the Oxford comma, the meaning is more ambiguous. It could also mean that Washington and Lincoln are the names of the two rhinos that were invited. Again, in formal writing, it is never wrong to include the Oxford comma. A non-essential or non-restrictive element is one that could be deleted without changing the basic meaning of the sentence. It should be set off with commas. An essential or restrictive element is one that is needed to understand the sentence. Therefore, it should not be set off with commas. Spanish, which is a Romance language, is one of 6 official languages at the United Nations. The detail about being a Romance language adds information, but it's not essential to the meaning of the sentence, and so it's set off with commas. Navajo is the Athabascan language that is spoken in the Southwest by the Navajo people. The detail about where Navajo is spoken is essential. Navajo is not the only Athabascan language. It is the Athabascan language that is spoken in the Southwest. Note that the meaning of a sentence can change depending on whether or not an element is set off with commas. My sister, Mary, just published her first novel. The writer only has one sister. My sister Mary just published her first novel. The writer has more than one sister. The one named Mary just published a novel. Essential and non-essential elements can be clauses, phrases, or words. In this sentence, he always drove Chryslers, which are made in America. The appositive phrase, which are made in America, is non-essential. However, he always drove cars that were made in America. That were made in America is essential to the meaning of the sentence. Trying to open the mosquito netting around my bed is not essential to the rest of this sentence. I fumble in the dark. I see my mother clutching my baby sister contains only restrictive information. At 8:59, Flight 175 passenger Brian David Sweeney tried to call his wife Julie. At 9 o'clock, Lee Hansen received a second call from his son Peter. Sweeney had only one wife, so her name provides extra but non-essential information. Hansen presumably has more than one son, so it's essential to specify which son called. Information that interrupts the flow of a sentence, or parenthetical information, needs to be set off with commas. Bob's conduct, comma, most of us will immediately respond, comma, was gravely wrong. With as little as 2 servings of vegetables a day, comma, it seems to me, comma, you can improve your eating habits. Transitions such as thus, nevertheless, for example, and in fact help connect sentences or parts of sentences. They're usually set off with commas, as illustrated here. The real world comma, however, is run by money. When a transition connects two independent clauses in the same sentence, it's preceded by a semicolon and is followed by a comma. There are few among the poor who speak of themselves as lower class, semicolon. Instead, comma, they refer to their race, ethnic group, or geographic location. Use commas to set off quoted words from the speaker or source. Pa shouts back, comma, I just want to know where the gunfire is coming from. You put a stick and a con man together, comma, she said, comma, and you have predatory lenders. Death and life are in the power of the tongue, comma, says the proverb. When the speaker in the quote directly addresses someone by name, that name is set off by commas. Yes, comma, Virginia, comma, there is a Santa Claus. When an explanation follows a yes or no answer, no, comma, you cannot replace the battery on your iPhone. Use a comma after an interjection. Oh, comma, a PS4. How long did you have to wait to get it? And use a comma when a question is tagged onto the end of a statement. That wasn't so hard, comma, was it? Of course, commas are required with addresses and place names. Send contributions to Human Rights Campaign, comma, 1640 Rhode Island Avenue, comma, Washington, comma, DC 20036. Athens, comma, Georgia, comma, is famous for its thriving music scene. Use a comma with dates. Amelia Earhart disappeared over the Pacific Ocean on July 2, 1937, while trying to make the first round-the-world flight at the equator. Omit the commas, however, if you invert the date, such as on 2 July 1937, or if you give only the month and year, in July 1937. Commas have so many uses that it's easy to add them unnecessarily. Here are some situations when you should not use a comma between a subject and a verb. What the organizers of the 1969 Woodstock concert did not anticipate was the turnout. There should be no comma between anticipate and was. The event's promoters turned down John Lennon's offer to play with his Plastic Ono band. Again, no comma between promoters and turned. Don't put a comma between a verb and its object or complement, such as here. Pollsters wondered how they had so poorly predicted the winner of the 1948 presidential election. And here, virtually every prediction indicated that Thomas Dewey would defeat Harry Truman. The Chicago Tribune's famous wrong headline was an embarrassment to the newspaper. Don't use a comma after a coordinating conjunction. The College Board reported a decline in SAT scores and attributed the decline to changes in student test-taking patterns. The SAT was created to provide an objective measure of academic potential, but studies in the 1980s found racial and socioeconomic biases in some test questions. You never add a comma after like or such as. Many American-born authors, such as Henry James, Ezra Pound, and F. Scott Fitzgerald, lived as expatriates in Europe. Don't insert a comma after a question mark or an exclamation point. Why would any nation have a monarch in the era of democracy, you might ask yourself. Oh, be some other name, exclaims Juliet. In Lesson 1, Commas, we talked about commas being important to prevent confusion and ambiguity. Use them to join independent clauses with a coordinating conjunction, to set off introductory words, to separate items in a series, and to set off non-essential elements, parenthetical information, transitional expressions, quotations, direct addresses, interjections, and tag questions. Be sure to take the Canvas quizzes on commas. In Lesson 2, we'll talk about the role semicolons play in clear communication. Thanks for stopping by. And thanks to Slides Carnival and Unsplash for their help with my slides template. See you next time.